There's a sentence that Marco Rubio said to reporters on Capitol Hill on Monday. A sentence that every constitutional lawyer, every war power scholar, every foreign ally who was not consulted before Operation Epic Fury launched, and every American senator who walked out of his classified briefing saying the answers were completely and totally insufficient. We'll be citing for the next decade as the moment the Trump administration accidentally told the world the truth about why this war started. The sentence is this: we knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties. Rubio said the threat from Iran was imminent because it knew it would retaliate against the U.S. if attacked, including by Israel. It was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond and respond against the United States. The orders had been delegated down to the field commanders. Rubio said it was automatic. If we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. Read that sequence with legal precision. Iran was going to be attacked by Israel. Iran would respond to that attack against America. Therefore, America attacked Iran first, not because Iran was attacking America, not because Iran had launched missiles at American forces, because Israel was going to attack Iran, and Iran would retaliate against American forces as a consequence of Israel's action. And America decided to preemptively strike Iran to reduce the casualties it would take from Iran's response to Israel's operation. That is not a legal justification for war under the War Powers Act. That is not a legal justification for war under international law. That is the precise description of a country that launched a war to protect itself from the consequences of its allies' aggression, and admitted it on camera to reporters outside a congressional briefing room while the war was ongoing. Upon leaving a briefing on the war in Iran with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer told reporters, "I found their answers completely and totally insufficient. In fact, at least to me, that briefing raised many more questions than it answered." Schumer said, completely and totally insufficient. The Senate Minority Leader, not a fringe critic, not an opposition backbencher, but the Democratic leader of the United States Senate. A man with full security clearance, who just sat through the classified briefing, walked out and told reporters the answers were insufficient, and raised more questions than they answered in the middle of a war on day 4. And then in Riyadh, 2 drones found the American embassy. A limited fire has broken out at the United States Embassy in the Saudi capital of Riyadh after it was hit by 2 drones. The strike on the U.S. Embassy early on Tuesday caused minor material damage to the compound. The Saudi Ministry of Defense said in a statement, black smoke was seen rising over Riyadh's diplomatic quarter, which houses foreign missions after the attack. Black smoke over Riyadh's diplomatic quarter, the neighborhood that houses every major nation's embassy in the Saudi capital, the most heavily protected diplomatic zone in the Arab world. The neighborhood, whose security Saudi Arabia has guaranteed as a matter of national prestige for decades, is now producing smoke visible from street level because 2 Iranian drones flew past every defensive layer and found the American compound. 2 drones, not a barrage, not a sophisticated multi-vector assault, 2 drones, and they found the target. The source document today identifies the single most important operational question that no government, no intelligence agency, and no military command has yet answered publicly, and whose answer, when it comes, will redefine everything about how this war is being conducted. How does Iran know exactly where to aim? Among the locations targeted were Dubai's iconic Burj Al Arab Hotel, the Fairmont Hotel on the Palm, Jebel Ali Port, Abu Dhabi's Etihad Towers, and the international airports in the 2 Emirates. The Burj Al Arab, the Fairmont Palm, Etihad Towers. These are not coordinates pulled from a military targeting database. These are civilian landmarks, iconic buildings in cities that Iran has never previously targeted in any conflict. Striking these specific structures, not the surrounding neighborhoods, not the general districts, but these exact buildings, requires one of 2 things: satellite imagery of high enough resolution to isolate individual building signatures, or a human source on the ground, transmitting precise coordinates to those planning the attack. That level of targeting precision tells us something deeply troubling about the intelligence infrastructure behind this campaign. The UAE's Ministry of Defense announced on X that since the start of the Iranian offensive, its Air Force and air defense units had intercepted 165 ballistic missiles, 2 cruise missiles, and 541 Iranian drones. Read those numbers carefully. Those are the weapons that were stopped. They do not represent the total number launched. They represent only the fraction that was caught. And despite that extraordinary effort, a hotel still burned. A port still smoked. 2 drones that were not intercepted set the embassy in Riyadh on fire. By Tuesday, day 4 of this conflict, the State Department had expanded its evacuation of non-emergency personnel and family members to 6 nations: Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, and now the United Arab Emirates. 6 simultaneous diplomatic evacuations. This is not a routine precaution. This is the United States pulling its people out of an entire region while the conflict is still actively unfolding. Hours earlier, Moira Namdar, the Assistant Secretary of State for Consular Affairs, issued a statement with 2 words that cut through all the diplomatic language. Depart now. Not limit non-essential travel, not shelter in place and await instructions. Depart now from Israel, Bahrain, Egypt, Iraq, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Lebanon, Qatar, Oman, Syria, Yemen, and Jordan. 13 countries. Every single country in the Middle East where American civilians have a meaningful presence. Every business person, expatriate worker, tourist, NGO employee, and journalist is being told to leave immediately using commercial means. The same commercial aviation network that canceled over 400 flights on Sunday. The same airports Iran has been targeting since Saturday. The State Department is telling Americans to flee a region whose airspace has been intermittently closed for 4 days, using airlines that may or may not be flying, through airports that may or may not be safe. Against this backdrop, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stood in front of cameras on day 4 and announced, "The goal is not regime change." Let that land for a moment. Since the first bomb fell on Saturday morning, President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and virtually every official briefing described regime change as the core purpose of the operation. Now, on day 4, the Pentagon chief is explicitly reversing that stated objective on camera. And simultaneously, Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters that the next phase of the Iran operation would be even more punishing. Not regime change, but even more punishing. A war with no defined objective, an expanding geographic footprint, an evacuating diplomatic corps, and a Secretary of State promising escalation without a declared endgame. The campaign has already killed 555 Iranians, burned hotels in Dubai, shut down operations at one of the world's busiest ports, and produced black smoke rising over the diplomatic quarter of Riyadh. Rubio says the next phase will surpass all of that. Then came the disclosure that may be the single most consequential piece of military-industrial information released by any American official since this war began. Speaking to reporters on Capitol Hill, Rubio revealed that the United States produces 6 to 7 interceptor missiles per month. Iran, by contrast, manufactures approximately 100 missiles and thousands of drones per month. 6 American interceptors, 100 Iranian missiles, not counting the drones. That ratio, roughly 15 to 1 in Iran's favor, is the arithmetic of a conflict that cannot be sustained through defensive means alone. Every Patriot battery, every THAAD system currently deployed across the Gulf is consuming interceptors at a rate that America's defense industrial base simply cannot replenish on any timeline relevant to a 4 to 5 week campaign. The defensive architecture being relied upon to protect American forces and allied nations is being drawn down faster than it can be rebuilt. Rubio did not say this in a classified briefing. He said it publicly, to reporters standing in a hallway outside a briefing room on Capitol Hill. The Secretary of State of the United States told the world, and by extension, Tehran, that Iran outproduces America in the weapons category most critical to this war by a factor of roughly 15 to 1. When asked about American casualties on day 1, President Trump said, "You'll find out soon." That phrase preceded the confirmation of 6 dead American service members. It preceded an F-15 friendly fire incident. And now, after 2 Iranian drones struck the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, Trump told News Nation that the United States would respond. When asked what form the retaliation would take, he said, "You'll find out soon. It likely won't be necessary to put boots on the ground." The same phrase again. Whatever retaliation is being planned will produce its own Iranian response. That response will produce its own American counterstrike. The UN Secretary General has described this as a chain of events that no one can control. That chain is now in motion. Meanwhile, U.S. airstrikes targeting a base in southeastern Iran killed at least 13 Iranian troops, according to local media and the semi-official Tasnim news agency. The strike hit the Kerman Air Base approximately 500 miles southeast of Tehran, in the part of Iran closest to the Pakistani border. America is now conducting strikes in the southeastern corner of Iran. Any further geographic expansion in that direction brings the conflict into proximity with Pakistan's airspace, and Pakistan is a nuclear-armed state. The expansion of this campaign is not simply a military development, it is a signal to every country in the region about how far American strikes are prepared to reach, and how close to their own borders this war is willing to move. Amazon issued notices to customers across the Middle East, warning of longer delivery times due to regional instability. The company's data centers in the UAE and Bahrain were experiencing prolonged power outages as a direct result of the conflict. This is worth pausing on. Amazon's cloud infrastructure does not just support retail deliveries. It underpins the digital operations of corporations, governments, banks, and hospitals across the region. The UAE and Bahrain built their modern economic identities on being digital and financial hubs, the kind of sophisticated, technology-driven economies that attract global investment and multinational headquarters. That infrastructure is now going dark because the war has knocked out power to the servers that make it run. This is not a side effect of the conflict. This is the economic fabric of the 21st century Gulf, the layer of digital civilization that sits on top of oil, going offline alongside the physical infrastructure of ports, refineries, and airports that has been burning since Saturday morning. On day 4, this is where we stand. The U.S. Embassy in Riyadh is on fire. 6 American service members are confirmed dead. The State Department has told citizens in 13 countries to depart now. Amazon's data centers are offline in the UAE and Bahrain. The Pentagon chief has abandoned the regime change objective that was used to justify starting this war. Marco Rubio has publicly confirmed that the United States produces 6 interceptor missiles per month, while Iran produces 100. And Rubio is promising the next phase will be even more punishing than the phase that has already produced all of the above. 6 to 7 interceptors per month against 100 Iranian missiles and thousands of drones. That math does not produce an American victory in 4 to 5 weeks. It produces a depleted defensive architecture, an evacuated diplomatic corps, a Gulf economic model in ruins, and a Secretary of State standing outside a briefing room, admitting the answers he just gave the Senate were insufficient, while promising further escalation with no stated objective. Day 4. The next phase is coming.